Chapter 7 The Wizard Within. Imagine you had a magical cell phone, one you would carry with you at all times. A cell phone allowing you to ask for advice whenever you needed it. And the person on the other end of the line would have but one intention in mind. It is to help you at all cost. Wouldn't that be great? Aniola decided to offer one of these magic cell phones to Shaoni. But would Shaoni accept this exceptional present? Of course you can't hear him, Aniola said. You are not listening. What do you mean, I am not listening? Shaoni replied. I just never heard anybody speak to me in my head before. I mean, I really don't think there is someone in my head. Someone I can ask for advice, no less. Shaoni always had a hard time believing what the wizard told him. Most of the time, it didn't seem to make sense. It was as if he was hearing stories about another world, something that only happened in fairy tales or children's stories. No, Shaoni was pretty sure about it. If there was someone speaking to him in his head, beside himself, that is, he would have heard him by now for sure. And so convinced you are, the wizard replied smilingly. Do you remember the story that I told you about the Sunglass Society? Do you remember how these people couldn't see the world of colors around? Yet the colors existed, didn't they? Think about that, my boy. As long as you stay convinced that something doesn't exist, you will not see it, even if it is standing right in front of you. Shaoni looked up at the wizard, sitting beside him. Are you saying that I can only see the things that I believe in? Sure thing. Or hear, or smell, or taste. If you don't believe something to be, then for you, it doesn't exist. Shaoni thought about it for a second. So if a cat sits in front of my nose, and I think there is no cat, I won't see the cat? What? Said the wizard, being a little surprised by that last remark. Ah, indeed. If you really believe there is no cat, you won't see it. Suddenly, Shaoni saw a rabbit sitting under a bush, a bit further down the road. He closed his eyes, concentrating, telling himself there was no rabbit. No rabbit. No rabbit, he constantly repeated to himself. He looked again. I must be doing something wrong, he thought as he stopped his efforts. The rabbit was still there, staring right back at him. The wizard hadn't noticed Shaoni's rabbit at all. He got up, indicating that it was time to move on. As they started to walk down the road, he suddenly recalled something that once happened to him a long time ago. I remember once, he said, while traveling through the Amazon forest, how I was invited by a local tribesman, Wyoni, to spend the night in his village. On arrival, I was surprised to find a radio in his hut. When I asked him about the radio and what he used it for, he said it didn't have any use. It was just one of those things the white men used to carry around all the time, but it didn't have any use. When I told him the thing did have a use, and tried to tell him about it, he was very surprised. The thing had been standing there for years, he said, and never had he heard any sound come out of it, let alone a person's voice or a song. It's nonsense, he said. But then again, he wasn't surprised. After all, he had met other white people before, and he knew they all seemed to have lost track of reality. The wizard paused before continuing. The reason why Wyoni didn't believe me is because his experience for ever so long had told him that it simply wasn't so. Useless things that white people carry with them don't make sounds, he knew. And furthermore, White people spoke gibberish most of the time anyhow. Case closed. Suddenly, Aneola stopped and looked at Shaoni. The important thing here, however, is not the old tribesman, but you. Just like Wyoni, you too have a radio. And it's not just an ordinary radio, but a special one, tuned in especially to you. A radio you can switch on whenever you want. You see, Shaoni, maybe the tribesmen didn't know how to use an ordinary radio. But he knew how to turn on his radio within, because that was part of his culture. Already as a young boy, he had been told how to turn his attention inwards and listen to his radio within. Listening to his radio within to him was like the most normal thing on earth, just as normal as it is for you to listen to a normal radio. Once again, the wizard paused. Some people laugh when they hear about those men like Wyoni turning inwards to listen to their inner radio. They simply cannot accept or understand. But have they ever tried it? Always remember, my dear boy, Wyoni didn't hear the old radio in his hut either. But does that say something about the radio? Or about the things he believed in? Do you mean to say, then, that everybody has a radio in his head? That's how it is, the wizard replied. Shaoni's mind wandered off. The thought of having some sort of a radio in his head, a radio he could listen to whenever he felt like it, seemed like a great idea. Would you like to show me, then, what to do to listen to that radio? Sure, Aneola said. Not only because I know you are willing to open your mind to it, but most of all, because there is so much to gain from it. Actually, there is so much wisdom and knowledge to be found there that I personally call it the Wizard Within. Shaoni fell quiet for a moment, just thinking about the radio in his head. And I can tune into and listen to that radio, that Wizard Within, whenever I want? He then asked. The answer from Aneola was beyond all expectations. Not only that, Shaoni. Soon you will find out that you can even talk to him, and ask for any help or advice you need. But as with most things in life, the best thing to do is to try it out for yourself. Shaoni lay back in the grass. A wizard within, he thought, and I can ask him for help and advice. Sounds like fun to me. Later that evening, the wizard came up to the boy and said, "Tonight, my boy, just before falling asleep, go to your center and imagine. Imagine that you have a problem that needs solving, and imagine asking your wizard within to help you find the answer. Then, tomorrow when you wake up, look within. Chances are you have already received the answer. And if you haven't, the answer will come to you in the coming days. Be aware and listen out for it." Is that how it works, then? Shaoni asked. Yes, the wizard replied. Or at least, at first it is. You see, Shaoni, when you are just starting out, the messages are not always clear. It is as if you still have to learn to tune in your radio to the right frequency, or tune into the language of the wizard, if you prefer. But as you get more proficient, it becomes easier.